Hi there. Welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Well, folks, today let's talk about competence. I know, another exciting topic, right? Today we're going to talk about competence. And often when we think of competence, we think of potentially our own competence, right? We might be thinking about, well, my knowledge, skills, and abilities, or my team members. If I'm a leader, it might be my team, might be my own. And, and you can break those into knowledge, skills, and abilities. And so often you see where so many people have their entire resume littered with all kinds of education and everything else, but potentially their ability to actually lead teams and to affect change and to build a good team dynamic may not be as high as their knowledge, right? Their knowledge. You often hear this as a complaint within the broader team when I've gone to different organizations, and it's kind of subtle. It's not, overt, like they're running around screaming their head off, but their concern is that the leader just doesn't understand people, right? And that might be true. They may just be busy, right? And maybe they just haven't grown toward that ability or their potential, I guess you could say, grown into their potential to actually lead that team well and to bring these team members together. So it really just depends. All of us are going to be at different levels of our knowledge, skills, and ability, and experience is a big piece of that puzzle, right? So you might have the knowledge, okay, great. And now the skill. Well, the skills require time, right? And of course, ability. There's some folks who are just born more natural leaders than others. Some people may have very little higher education, for example, but be fantastic leaders. And as they progress through their career with a lot of experience, say technically and so forth, have turned into really amazing leaders. So you can never quite tell how that mixture is going to work out best for an organization. And sometimes organizations, their competence, right? So let's flip over to the organizational competence. Very difficult for an organization to kind of turn on the magnifying glass on some of these newer and experienced and inexperienced and so forth leaders when their organizational competence to say retain folks, right? So if you have a significant retention issue, you've had some decent leaders in the past, maybe they've moved on, got promoted, into other jobs and so forth, but yet you struggle with turnover, it's probably because possibly you're putting leaders in the seat that aren't, quite there yet. And that's okay to understand that, but you really have to put the time, attention, and focus on developing those leaders, especially if you plan to develop them in house. The other part of that, though, is the organization has to take a bit of a hit too, because if you don't have a development program in place for your broader team to be able to grow, into higher levels of, say promotion or take on different skill sets or some incremental level of promotion, if you don't have that, you're going to be hurting quite a bit because some of these leaders need to be able to reward these folks who gain knowledge, skills, and abilities. Now, you can give pay raises and that sort of thing, and that's fine. But it's better if you can increase their ability to become leaders themselves, whether they be leads or supervisors and that sort of thing. Um, so let's skip into the functional leader arena. So you may have functional leaders like HR, and you may have engineering departments or uh, controllers or accountants. They're leading a particular department. It may be small. Their impact is significant because of the functional element of what they're dealing with, but they're not necessarily trained leaders. It doesn't mean they don't have potentially high levels of natural talent. It's quite possible. But if you took, somebody in charge of a handful of folks functionally and you threw them in charge of everyone, now this is where the test comes. Can they build a team? Can they meld in to be learners, to learn the technical elements and so forth of what the organization produces or the services they provide? Because what can happen is that there can be kind of an assumptive competence, right? That, oh, they're a functional leader, therefore they have it all figured out. And it's just not the case, right? So you could actually find out, you could actually come to figure out that your supervisors, high level, high time, high level supervisor, department level, say managers, have a significant level of leadership capability over those small department functional leaders, even though those functional leaders in those smaller departments, what they do is a vital piece of the organization's ability to get the overall job accomplished, right? So it's kind of a mix and match, and you really have to be careful because competence, it's so easy for say supervisors and managers to look at their teams and say, oh well, so and so isn't competent and all this stuff, and make assessments, but yet are you accurately getting a good good self-assessment of those supervisors and those junior managers, not to mention some that have been doing this for a while that perhaps have not expanded their knowledge, skills, and abilities, right? So they haven't grown. So they're still working off a 20, 30-year-old paradigm potentially. And if that's the case, there's opportunity to grow their knowledge, skills, and abilities. The challenge, though, is that how much experience are they going to get to apply the new knowledge if they haven't been doing it for the last couple of decades, right? So you're going to have to make a choice to invest in those leaders' improvement and their improvement of their competence. Organizationally, though, what speaks to the organization overall, the competence level of the organization? Well, your KPIs, right? Key performance indicators. So what's your productivity? What's your scrap? What's your turnover or retention rate? Right? What's your sales? What's your conversion rate in sales? Are you best in class? Very difficult for an organization who isn't even approaching best in class to be wielding an axe of judgment over a team in the competence arena, especially if they aren't investing in a development program, even if it's born in house. If you aren't doing that, then you own all of it. You own all of the results of that KPI or those KPIs not giving you the results that you want. And I don't care if you bring in, a new leader every year, every other year to take on a particular department or an overall site or whatever. If you aren't taking care of your team, if you're not developing them, you're failing, right? And that is showing not developing your team is a metered uh, level of competence. If I can't develop a team, then I lack competence in that area. Now, let's push that off to the side. Competence also, nowadays, because we are in an environment nowadays where we want to improve as we go, we want to empower our teams to improve. Hopefully, we haven't thrown that in the waste bin. We see the relevance and the need for that because it's absolutely vital, especially with all of the lack of competence and the lack of ability and turnover and all the things that are just imploding right now in many industries. And it doesn't really matter if you're a master orator and that you can recite word for word your TED Talk. That's fantastic. I applaud you for it. However, we have to understand that improving an organization is much more difficult and requires much more a greater ability to draw a team together focused on solving a problem than simply, I'll use this example. Say I have a bus. Right? It's a city bus, whatever, driving around town. It's one thing if you have a perfectly operating bus and the driver that gets off shift, say, the first shift, gets off that bus and another driver gets on that bus and they grab the wheel and they start driving that bus. They just move right along. Not a hitch at all. They just keep moving, right? Now, knock a wheel off that bus right? Don't change the oil in it, barely put enough fuel in it, make the folks on board pretty disgruntled because you've been stalling out and all these things. And now have a driver get on that bus and say, okay, I need you to perform, right? This is what you're doing to some of these leaders out there now is they don't have the ability to fix the wheel, to calm the folks in the back, right, the broader team, and coordinate, get them to cooperate and coordinate and to move forward to solve a problem together, right, and get the fuel and do the thing so that this bus can then get back up on four wheels, can actually get to its destination in a timely way. Add to that, much of the objective now is like, well, I have a broken down bus, but I need this bus to compete in the Indy 500. Well, most buses can't compete in the Indy 500 anyway, but you want this bus to go, right? So you want to max out their ability to produce, say. Well, again, you're not going to have somebody just get off the bus, driving the bus, and then another person get on the bus, and miraculously, they're going to be able to turn that bus into a competitive IndyCar sprint bus, right? Or whatever. Whatever the terminology is. I don't claim to be a, aficionado to perfection in that arena, but you get the idea. You're not going to expect them to get on, just grab the wheel and go and do that. But this is kind of what's required right now. Right now, so many organizations are floundering in such a way that the buses are broken. They haven't been serviced. The riders are disgruntled, right? You've got all kinds of things going on. And now some of these, the ownerships and different hiring entities are saying, oh, well, we're looking for, somebody to drive this bus to compete in the Indy race, right? But in the past, this bus has barely gotten around the block and through town, okay? It's doable. Here's the fun part. It's doable, but you need to be able to go out there and understand that you've got to invest in repairing the bus, getting the team to cooperate. There's going to be a certain level of investment to fixing your bus and to getting it moving. Bus is your organization, right? Could be site level, could be many sites. But you have to see the reality of where you actually are and not live in a fantasy world of who you think you are. See it as it is, because if you haven't even gone and seen your bus, you're hearing it fourth, fifth person away. Let's say you're the CEO of that company and you haven't been to that site in 5 years. All of a sudden, it's like, yeah, I think it's struggling. That bus isn't really moving well. No, that bus isn't not moving well. It's rusted out. It's all four wheels are on the, folded off of the thing. Transmission is broken down. The engine doesn't work. Your riders are stranded out in the middle of the desert. They're about to keel because they have no water, and you want this thing to compete, right? You want your bus to compete in some grand race. You see where I'm going with this? Obviously, I'm using an extreme example, a little bit far-fetched for sure, but not too far-fetched off of the mark. This also speaks to a level of competence as well. Do you have the ability to see the reality? Are you competently seeing the reality of the situation? And do you understand that you can buy a whole new bus and you can get a whole, go to a whole different area, pick up whole new riders that, didn't know that the bus was broken down before and bring them on board, but you're going to pay for that. Right? So you got two avenues. You pay now or pay later. You're either going to have to buy a new bus and get new riders in the whole bit and a driver that can handle all that, or you're going to have to invest in repairing the bus, right? That's the only two avenues you have. And it takes competence to have that sober-mindedness to see the reality of the situation. God forbid if people are in harm's way and there are safety issues in your organization because of this bus. Right? The bus is clearly unsafe. So, and it may be unsafe and has been unsafe for many moons, right? So, just wanted to touch a little bit today on competence. There is no assumption regarding competence I don't care what level you're at, whether you're the CEO or the brand new employee, we can all improve upon our ability to be competent in what we're doing, what we're assessing real time, and to evaluate the situation. It doesn't mean we're going to be that any of us are perfect, but we need to be open and humble to the fact that we can improve our competence. And if you're humble to that fact, and you're humble to the fact of, look, you know, I'm a baseball player. I'll give you an example. I'm a baseball player and I can hit it out of the park, 40 times a year, right? 40 times a season. Okay, great. But that baseball player that hit it out of the park 40 times a season, they aren't a bus mechanic, right? So in the end, that you can hit it out of the park 40 times a year doesn't help me get my bus moving. Okay, this is a kind of what happens when people are singularly competent in a, say, functional area, or if their skill sets or their ability, knowledge, skills, and abilities have not progressed over time. And I don't mean they went back and got 3 or 4 or 5 different degrees. That's fantastic. Have they put it to use? Have they had experience putting this into process, right? Because if they haven't, then you're just trying really well and really hard, and that's great. But that's also going to take time. You're going to have to invest in schooling them along. And if you're unable to do it, that's when you reach out to try to get folks to help you out. So anyway, just wanted to talk a little bit today about competence. Remember, if we want to be competent and helpful in culture, we want to hit that good domino 3 to 5 times a day or more to uplift, motivate, inspire, and just encourage folks. And when we do that, not only is culture going to transform in our organizations, but also the broader culture. And guess what? All of our competence can improve as well. All right, folks, just touching base today on competence. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Till next time, we'll talk to you later.